Have you ever shivered in your own home, even with the heating on full blast, and wondered how on earth people survived winters centuries ago? I'm talking about living in massive, drafty stone castles during the medieval period. Seems impossible, right? You'd think those places would be giant, freezing stone refrigerators. But what if I told you those ancient walls were actually genius pieces of climate control technology? They didn't just endure the cold. They were specifically designed to fight it. And the secrets they hold could change the way we think about building today. Let's start by debunking a common myth. We often picture medieval castles as these single-layer, solid stone structures. But that's not the whole story. The most impressive castles weren't just one wall, they were two. Think of it like a sandwich. You had an outer wall and an inner wall, both made of sturdy, locally sourced stone. But the real magic happened in the middle. The gap between these two walls, which could be several feet wide, wasn't left empty. It was filled with a rubble core. This core was a messy, seemingly random mix of smaller stones, mortars, sand, and sometimes even bits of tile or earth. Now, you might be thinking, a bunch of junk in the middle of a wall. How does that help? Well, that junk was the key to their thermal brilliance. This rubble core was much less dense than solid stone and was full of tiny air pockets. And what's one of the best insulators in the world? Air. These trapped pockets of air dramatically slowed down the transfer of cold from the outside to the inside. It's the same principle behind modern double-glazed windows or a down-filled winter jacket. The medieval builders created a massive, insulated barrier that kept the biting winter winds at bay. This construction method is known as a cavity wall or rubble fill wall. It wasn't just about insulation, though. It was also a clever use of resources. The finest, most well-cut stones, called ashlar blocks, were expensive and time-consuming to produce. They were used for the visible outer and inner faces of the wall to provide strength and a smooth finish. But the core could be filled with all the leftover, less perfect material. It was an incredibly efficient and economical way to build something so monumental. They were achieving maximum thickness and insulation with minimum cost and labor on the most expensive materials. This practicality is a hallmark of medieval engineering. They weren't just building for show. They were building for survival. But insulation is only half the battle. You also need a source of heat. And that's where the other genius feature of these walls comes in: thermal mass. Stone, especially the dense, thick stone used in castles, has a high thermal mass. This means it's very good at absorbing, storing, and slowly releasing heat. Throughout the day, any heat generated inside the castle from the great hearths, from cooking fires, even from the body heat of all the people and animals inside, would be slowly absorbed by these massive stone walls. The inner layer of stone would soak up this warmth like a sponge. Then, as the temperatures dropped overnight, the walls would begin to radiate that stored heat back into the room. It was like having a giant slow-release radiator built into the very fabric of the building. This effect helped to stabilize the internal temperature, preventing the drastic highs and lows you might expect. It meant the castle didn't just get freezing cold the moment the fires died down. The walls themselves became a secondary heating system, creating a much more livable environment than we might imagine. Think about the Great Hall in a castle. It would have a colossal fireplace, burning logs day and night. The direct heat from the fire would warm the people nearby, but the immense radiant heat would be absorbed by the surrounding stone walls, floors, and even the high ceilings. Later in the evening, people could move away from the roaring fire and still feel a gentle, ambient warmth radiating from the stones around them. This combination of a low-conductivity rubble core and a high thermal mass inner wall was a 1-2 punch against the cold. The insulation kept the cold out, and the thermal mass kept the warmth in. Now let's talk about placement and design. Castle builders were also master strategists when it came to location. Whenever possible, they would build on sites that offered natural advantages. This often meant choosing a south-facing slope. Why? To take advantage of solar gain. During the winter, the sun is lower in the sky. A south-facing wall would receive direct sunlight for the longest part of the day. This passive solar heating was a free and powerful way to warm up the castle's massive stone exterior. The outer stones would absorb the sun's energy, and some of that warmth would slowly travel through the wall, further helping to combat the cold. The windows were also strategically placed. You'll notice that many castles have fewer and smaller windows on the north-facing side, which is the coldest and windiest direction. The larger windows were often reserved for the more protected south-facing walls of the inner courtyards, where they could let in light and warmth without exposing the interior to the harshest elements. It added color and artistry to the space while also making it more livable. Essentially, they were adding an extra layer to their wall insulation system, but on the inside? Let's consider the sheer scale of it all. The walls of a major castle weren't just a foot thick. It could be 10, 15, even 20 feet thick. The sheer amount of material involved is staggering. This incredible thickness amplified all the principles we've discussed. It meant a deeper rubble core for more insulation and a more substantial inner wall for greater thermal mass. It also meant that it took a very, very long time for the cold to penetrate from the outside to the inside. In a deep freeze, the outer few feet of the wall might become chilled. But the core and the inner wall would remain protected, still holding on to their stored warmth. This is why even ruined castles today, with no roofs and open to the elements, can feel surprisingly sheltered on a windy day. The surviving walls still block the wind and radiate a tiny bit of stored solar heat. So, when we put it all together, the picture of a medieval castle in winter changes completely. It's not a frigid tomb. It's a carefully engineered system. It starts with a smart choice of location for passive solar gain. Then you have the composite walls, with a rubble core acting as insulation to keep the cold out. Inside, massive fireplaces generate heat, which is then absorbed and stored by the high thermal mass of the inner stone walls. These walls then radiate that heat back into the rooms, stabilizing the temperature. Finally, tapestries are hung to provide an extra layer of insulation and block drafts. It's a multi-layered defense system against the cold, using the natural properties of the materials and clever design. What's truly amazing is that these principles are still incredibly relevant today. Modern architecture is rediscovering the benefits of thermal mass and passive solar design. We talk about green building and sustainable architecture, but in many ways, we're just relearning the lessons that medieval masons knew instinctively. They didn't have computer models or advanced material science, but they had a deep understanding of their local environment and materials, passed down through generations. They knew how stone behaved, how the sun moved, and how to build structures that would last not just for a lifetime, but for 1,000 years. So the next time you see a castle, don't just see a ruin of the past. See it as a masterclass in engineering, a testament to human ingenuity, and a powerful reminder that sometimes the oldest ideas are the smartest. Thanks for watching. If you found this fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the secrets of the past. Let me know in the comments what other ancient technologies you'd like to explore. See you next time.